Russ Feingold, the Democratic senator from Wisconsin, was the only senator, the lone senator, the one senator that voted against the U.S. Patriot Act when it came up for votes in October 2001. Unfortunately, Russ Feingold, a staunch defender of the rule of law, again, the lone senator that stood against the U.S. Patriot Act, lost in the most recent election to a Tea Party-supported Republican candidate. What the U.S. Patriot Act did was what Feingold predicted in his speech on the floor when he opposed the U.S. Patriot Act. That is, we would have a police state. This was the beginning of the official announcement of a police state. What the U.S. Patriot Act did, it gutted the Bill of Rights from the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, on through a list of amendments. It just basically gutted the Bill of Rights. In fact, the Patriot Act defined terrorism so broadly that basically marching down the street opposing the war, what we would normally call free speech activities, could be considered potential terrorist acts for investigation by the FBI. In fact, the FBI and other surveillance agencies actually investigated such groups as the Quakers who opposed the war. The idea was that if the government could identify and conduct surveillance on all Americans, you could ferret out the terrorists. You can see how excited law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies and the FBI and Department of Homeland Security could get really excited about that. The U.S. Patriot Act actually allowed the government to come in your home and conduct what they call black bag, sneak, and peek searches, where they could search for whatever they wanted in your home, not even tell you they were ever there. They could go to your bank under the Patriot Act and demand your records if they suspected you of terrorism. Again, that could be marching down the street with a picket sign opposing the war. They can go get your school records. And I've written a detailed commentary listing all the egregious acts that are allowed by government agencies and which government agencies did do under the Patriot Act in a commentary that I wrote called Renewing the Patriot Act While America Sleeps. And that's found at our website at rutherford.org. What the Patriot Act did was encode into law the basic principle that all Americans are suspects. If there was something that was merely suspicious, you could be investigated. There was the 60-year-old man in Oakland, California, Barry Reingold, who was at the gym getting cleaned up in the locker room, and he was just merely discussing with other people his opposition about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, someone thought that was suspicious activity, so they reported it to the local authorities, who reported to the FBI, and the FBI actually made a special trip to investigate Barry Reingold for his opposition, or just a few statements he made at the gym about the war, all approved under the U.S. Patriot Act. The Patriot Act had a sunset provision. It was supposedly to automatically expire after a certain amount of time. Americans got in quite an uproar about it at the time, what was going on. But even beyond the uproar, under George W. Bush in 2005, it was renewed again, and Bush signed it again into law. With Barack Obama, who actually made some negative statements about curtailing what was under the Patriot Act and how he was going to improve things under civil liberties, actually last year in February, Barack Obama again renewed the provisions under the U.S. Patriot Act. The American government itself doesn't have a great record in protecting civil liberties, from what happened to African Americans in the South during the Civil Rights era on up through the McCarthy era, which was an egregious era which the government got involved in people's lives because they were merely suspected of being dissidents or communists, to even the wiretapping of Martin Luther King Jr.'s telephone to find out what he was doing in terms of his free speech activities. The astounding thing is we hear very little today in opposition to the Patriot Act. It's set to be renewed again in February 2011. There's a bill been proposed for Congress, and it's most likely that our centrist president, Barack Obama, will again renew its provisions, even though, as I've pointed out, and it can be clearly proven, it gives the government amazing powers to gut the Bill of Rights. We're going to allow this, supposedly, under our new president. And I guess the question is why? Why have the civil liberties groups like the ACLU and others that were so vocal against the Patriot Act, why have they been so quiet? And why have most Americans gone to sleep? Well, let me give you a few reasons. One is we've been fooled into thinking, and all the talking heads on television, from the right-wingers to the left-wingers, are saying, all you got to do is go out and vote and things will be better. Well, as we're seeing with this new Republican Congress, that's probably not going to be true. In fact, recent reports show that this new Republican Congress is receiving millions of dollars in lobbyist money and corporations. And so don't expect a lot out of that. And now the so-called repeal of the health care law has been pushed front and center. Well, again, don't put much hope in that, but what we should be repealing is the U.S. Patriot Act, which gives the government all these amazing powers. And again, we were really quiet. We've gone to sleep. The ACLU and other groups are afraid to criticize the new president. Folks, I'm telling you one thing. We have, as Rush Feingold says in his great speech, and you should read it. Part of it's included in my commentary, which is found at rutherford.org, and you should read it on renewing the Patriot Act while America sleeps. We are moving into a police state, and being sidetracked by all these other issues while this is happening is a crime. And who's committing the crime? You and I and others that are not protesting the U.S. Patriot Act.